I'm Sonia Doubell and you're watching The Secret Bliss. And with us today is Steve Nobel. Steve is the recent ex-director of Alternatives, which is a spiritual organisation running events and workshops here in London for almost 30 years. And Steve is also an author of 4 amazing books and a writing coach, mentor, and many other things. So, Steve, thank you so much for being with us today.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
We've decided that in part 1 we're going to speak about Steve and his journey, how Steve actually got to this point in his life, and in part 2 we're going to speak about what Steve is doing today with his wonderful books, and he is running international workshops around the world for writers. So, lots of juicy stuff. Steve, I'd like to just mention that you did book some of the most incredible guests for Alternatives, which in our world of consciousness and spirituality is a really big deal. From Eckhart Tolle to Wayne Dyer back in the day to Byron Katie. There's some of the amazing guest speakers that have been, been a big role in changing people's lives. And one of the things I find interesting is, I myself have been to a great workshop with somebody dynamic, and that has shifted my way of thinking so much that I've woken up and just said, that's it. So what happens after watching them for 12 years? I mean, you must have had so many big shifts or pennies dropping in your life. How was that?
Well, actually, I first started coming to Alternatives in '91 as a member of the audience, and at that time I was very stressed. I was working in a stressful job and going, oh wow, this is amazing. I felt a bit like an oasis. Yeah. And a friend told me to go, and I went, and it was a kind of very, very powerful spiritual talk, and it blew me away. And then I went back into my stressful world, and then I started coming, not every week, here and there. I was still married at the time. This was my first wife, 2 children.
So this was 1991.
1991. My father had just died in January '91, and that kicked me off on a whole spiritual journey. Within 6 months, I met all the spiritual teachers who were going to be important for me for the next 20 years. Like, there was a massive synchronicity that happened one after the other. Wow. And Alternatives was part of that. I'm like, wow, this is a cool place. And then, to wind it forward, I divorced in '93. My bless her, my first wife was a strict Catholic, so she didn't approve of this sudden burst of spiritual interest.
I'm sure.
And so I started volunteering in Alternatives in '94. I started working for them in the office in '98, '99. Became an administrator, then a director, and then there was a massive Shakespearean Macbethian fight, and I was left holding the baby.
Okay.
And I had no real business experience to the extent I could run a business. So, and then for 12 years I was really kind of saying, well, will you show me the way? It was really like that, because I've done a lot of spiritual stuff. Yeah. But what I did know was to ask for help, and so I did. And I got really, my intuition was quite good. Yeah. So I really said, you're employed, book that speaker. It was more like that in the early days, because Alternatives was in financial difficulty.
Okay. So but it's almost a charity.
It's a not-for-profit. It got turned down for charity.
Oh, it did?
Yeah, we applied for charity, and they said, basically, you're too weird.
But you say, we do take place in a church. Does that help?
Well, we applied as educational charity status, and they said, no. But actually, what they said was, the charity commissioners do not recognise personal development as any benefit to the general public, whereas we do recognise that religion is a very big benefit. And we went, really? You're way out of touch.
Way out of touch. Oh my goodness. Was this back in the 90s when you applied?
This was about 98.
I wonder if you applied today, that's changed. I mean, it must have.
Well, actually being a not-for-profit company it put us on a commercial footing, which was really good, because otherwise I didn't like the idea of going out with a begging bowl, being a charity. I like the idea of going in the marketplace and making it happen.
Yeah. And it's a dynamic organisation, so you did so well.
Yeah.
I mean, it really. And it's interesting that that this spiritual and alternative company, not for profit, actually takes place in a church. There is such a...
It's a unique experiment. The old rector, Donald Reeves, had a vision. He went to some New Age conference. He stood up saying, every church in the land should have this New Age conferencey stuff. And there was a guy in the audience, Malcolm Stern, who said, let's do it. And that's how it started.
So forward thinking.
Yeah, 1982. So they started, and it was a huge success. Like, they had, do you know Elizabeth Kubler-Ross?
No.
She wrote on death and dying. They just had like 700 people turning up. They had Ram Dass. So the early days was really powerful. It was really
amazing. Yeah,
Malcolm's an amazing guy, and so we built on that. So it's come from a great kind of visionary beginning, and so I felt, and he's still on the board.
Part of that lineage.
Yeah,
keeping it going.
Yeah, he's still there, and we've had other directors like William Bloom, Nick Williams, and so it's been a great.
Yeah.
They've all been authors and a great kind of line, and so I feel that I've just been building on that. Really.
Amazing. And okay, so. Before this happened, you had 20 years in banking and working for Lambeth?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is very different.
It's very different. So I was doing A-levels, and my father, bless him, said to me, he said, you're not going to university, get a job. For various reasons, and I'm like, oh, what? Okay, so in the city I went, you know.
And that was the time that people were just going to the city, wasn't it? It was quite a big kind of movement that people, it was about money. And the city was where it was going to happen.
Yeah, it was only money conversations.
Right.
You know.
And it was a period where people were actually quite proud to talk about money, like they needed to make it, they weren't shy, it was that era really.
Yeah, this was just kind of Thatcher years and you know, all the changes around monetary that she brought in. And so, you know, this was the bonus culture. Still, it was like extraordinary.
Yeah.
People were like, I'm buying a Porsche and a flat with my money, and I'm like, I just couldn't relate to it. But I was in a department where I was processing arms to Iran.
Yeah, which is...
The Shah of Iran. British tanks were going like the clappers over there. And I'm like processing this. Here I am in my early 20s thinking, I didn't, you know, the idea of life's work wasn't in anybody's consciousness, but I knew this is not kind of what I'm meant to be doing. And every night I'm going home questioning it, and my wife is like, oh, just
get on with it.
And my colleagues, which I did actually, because I was very alternative, even though I was macrobiotic and doing yoga, and I was very into all of this.
Right.
None of my colleagues...
So you had that very clearly in your character even then.
Yeah.
So, you know, from having your yoga and now today being, you know, this part of the lineage of having booked Eckhart Tolle to selling arms, which is quite a dichotomy, right? Right. So we're in this area. You're in banking. You don't feel totally congruent with what's going on.
I feel absolutely non-congruent.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you stay there for 10 years.
The golden cage, I think a lot of people will understand it. I got a mortgage. I was married. I had 2 children by the age of 25. And I had, you know, you build the conservatory, you do the loans. So the more you do that, the more you kind of build up. And after 10 years, it was like something was building in me that I cannot do this anymore. It was becoming almost like a force in my body. And I remember speaking to my now ex-wife Anna and saying, I can't do this anymore. And she basically said, yes, you can.
Yeah.
And I'm like, right. So I knuckled down for another year, but I basically hit the wall running.
So that was 9 years, and you just said, I can't, I'm finished.
Yeah.
And then that last year was the final straw.
Yeah.
That was the year.
Yeah.
But you know what impresses me is that it's still 10 years. I mean, it's still 10 years. And so you're in this profession for 10 years, and then you finally, I can't do this anymore, you're at breaking point, I'm finished.
Yeah.
And what gave you the courage? Because a lot of people are going to be able to recognize this feeling. It's fear to just jump from something that is your bread and butter, that's sustaining your life, that's sending your kids to school. So what was the moment you just thought, I'm just going to jump and trust that life is going to catch me?
Well, on the one hand, there was a kind of growing faith in a kind of spiritual path. But there was the other side, was the practicalities of living on the earth and making money and all that. Yeah. And I couldn't reconcile them for a while. It was like, you know, inspirational workshop or whatever I'll talk, and then realities of banking. It's all about money. It's all about, you know, the shareholders. Screw everyone else. And I'm like, in my mind, I couldn't reconcile it. And it created a crisis in me. And the crisis meant that I did hit the wall running, and I burnt out, and I took a year off, sick. You know, I couldn't do it anymore. And I did go back thinking, can I do this? And then I I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I went and saw some woman who was a kind of medium, and I remember her saying to me, don't worry, this, and she described the next job to me, which is incredible. This is going to be like that, and that. And I'm like, what kind of job could that? And she said, you're going to be dealing with people, with lists of doctors, and I'm like, I can't imagine it. Anyway, I got a job in Lambeth, doing like a sheltered housing officer, which was exactly like that. I was driving around, managing all these schemes, and there was lists of GPs and carers and all this. You know, so I went from a right-wing conservative environment.
Yeah.
I mean, right-wing as in very conservative, very
Yeah.
kind of it's all about money.
Yes.
To a very left-wing, the most left-wing borough in London, and I went to the most left-wing directorate in that borough. My boss was a Stalinist and a Gary Glitter fan, which was very weird.
So that must have been you attracted that because you wanted something so different to what you had had.
I did want something very different.
Just really, but it still wasn't right.
No, but what I did discover there was people, and I liked people, and I liked dealing with people, and I could problem solve, and I started to manage, and I could manage people, and then there was problems which I just downloaded solutions for, and I'm like, this is really cool.
And it's just that you had an opportunity to, really exercise kind of humanity and heart, right? Because that's what you were doing.
Yeah.
Dealing with homeless people.
It was like elderly and young people with mental and serious problems.
But you're helping.
Yeah.
You're dealing in a space that is enabling you to give, and giving is such a healing.
Yeah.
So
it was brilliant in many, many ways, and it
Yeah.
opened me up. And in this period, I really found spirituality, and I was really like diving into everything in this period. And in this period also I divorced and was finding alternatives. So I was like going into alternatives while I was working in Lambeth.
that must have been difficult.
Yeah.
Going through a divorce, having changed your life, and did you feel as though you were going through the divorce partly because you had changed your life?
Yeah, I felt that I was thrown out. Like even my own family were really upset about it, and my when you marry, you marry into the family, don't you? And so that family was all very upset, and my children were kind of confused and suffering about it, and so there was this massive upset that was going on, and my family could not understand why you're doing what you're doing, what's wrong.
I thought you were somehow punishing them. Meantime, you were really saving yourself. You were saving yourself from a life of another 20 years in the city.
They thought I'd gone balmy, I think.
And I can really, as you're saying that, I can feel that so many people who have had the courage to just go, do you know, it's not for me, and change, have gone through the same thing. So how did you deal with that?
So it's an experience of being exiled.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody's, maybe people listening to this would feel that they've been exiled by family. I mean, one of the strongest systems that we have around us is family, and they're supposed to be our support network.
Yeah.
But often we're born into families which are the opposite, who do not support what we value or trying to impose their values onto us.
Yes.
It's a very kind of, like I was born, grew up through the 60s and all that.
Yeah.
And at that time, the old industrial revolution age, we moved into a much more fluid age, but those values still exist.
Yes.
So my father was get a proper job, work hard. It was all those kind of conform, don't stick out stuff,
Yes.
And which was just like, I had to jettison all that out of my mind because
Yeah.
alternative's not a proper job. My values, which I worked out, were freedom, creativity, spirituality and fun.
Yes.
Now none of those fit into banking anywhere.
Nowhere.
No, but
And they don't fit into the old mindset of that's not a job, that's not corporate. Anything creative, writing, dancing. And I often think it's the creative people that are the most frustrated in this world because they find themselves in what society deems, the right thing to do, and yet for them it's not.
Yeah.
So if being in that world is not for you, and it's for you, and you're not a creative mind, then great, you'd probably be really happy.
Yeah.
But it's the suffering of the creatives that have to go forward in what society deems that's the job for you. And I think that's probably how your journey was. You were always this frustrated creative inside that. And then, so you go to Lambeth, you really feel like you're in exile, but you've changed your life. So on one hand, you've got the divorce, you've got that to deal with, which is a mourning because it's huge to your life. And then you've got this new job, which you're still not complete with, yes?
Not complete with, but it did give me you know, this thing of inner potential, this kind of abstract
Yeah.
thing that we have, I started to realise, oh, I can problem solve, I can manage, you know, like the Matrix.
Yeah.
I didn't know I could do that. And I think that's true for a lot of people. They might be making widgets on a factory floor and they've got no idea what's inside them. And I think that's true for everyone that I've ever coached.
Yeah.
They've got no idea of this kind of inner giftedness, really.
Yeah.
And it is very abstract until it becomes real for them. You have to take the step. Like, I never knew I could public speak until I stood on stage and went, hello everyone. Oh, I can do it. Or I can interview, like, you know, you never
Yes.
can interview until you start
Until you do it.
Until you do it.
Yes.
Or I didn't know I could write a book until I had just written a book and I've just had it published. Oh my God. You know, and
there are boundaries you have to get over with that.
they're kind of comfort zones, familiarity zones that we're kept usually in tight zones of kind of, for a lot of people, helplessness or not being very capable or not being very whatever, not enough, you know,
Not
the
good
ego says
enough.
you're not enough,
Yes.
not smart enough, bright
Yeah.
enough, connected enough,
Very
qualified
common.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can't do that. But some of the most brilliant people are not qualified enough or connected enough or the right
Yeah.
gender or the right, you know, what is the right age really to start or to stop? It's crazy what we have in this society.
That to me goes back to what our society indoctrinates us with. Each society has a different set of rules and indoctrinations, and as we grow up, we kind of, we buy into that belief.
Yeah.
You know, you're too old to do that now, you know, you've hit 40. When some of the greatest spiritual leaders and teachers don't even, you know, they don't even think about it until they've hit 40.
Yeah.
Why? Because you need to walk on the planet for a good chunk of time before you can first understand, know thyself,
Yeah.
and then, you know, give that knowledge to other people. So, and I think one of the greatest gifts is the opportunity to study yourself. A lot of people don't get that till very late in life, but once we do get to study ourselves through whatever course. So I think for you, you know, this self-study, it wasn't always so apparent. You may have been unhappy in banking. You made the moves that you had to make. You may have been unhappy still, not completing this job. But self-study, would you say, came for you when you really started to dive into alternatives and then look back and go,
Well, before I came to alternatives, I was diving in, and
Yeah.
as a result of that, all kinds of doors started to open, and alternatives was one of them. And I stepped into that, and all kinds of other doors were opening all the time. And I'm like, what kind of a world? You know, after a world of restriction, and
Yeah.
like you can't do that, blah blah blah. There's rules, there's this and that. Even my family or the bank or land. But suddenly I was in an open field where the rules, I was making them up myself. Like in alternatives, as a director, we'd sit down and go, what should we create today? And it's like, and people like Deepak Chopra, Julia Cameron, all these names were people we sat down and said, who would we love to create them? And suddenly synchronicity somebody would say, I know a way to Richard Bandler, or I know a way to, I've got a connection to Julia Cameron, because it's really connections.
Yes.
It's not just they come to us, because a lot of these people go, in America, Julia Cameron, well, who's alternatives?
Yeah.
But we found them, and they come over, and we built a relationship. Now, Julia Cameron loves alternatives now.
Oh, she's a lovely
She
lady.
thought I was cute, I think.
Yeah,
and,
I think she...
you know, and somehow...
You must have got on with her very well, because
Yes.
you do the similar things with your writing retreats and workshops. I mean, it's very similar. You're coaxing out the creativity in people.
Yes.
I imagine that must have been a good friendship there.
I think definitely. So we could create anything we wanted. So I was in a different zone and meeting very interesting people who are kind of further along the line than me.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a very wonderful time of like, hey, there are no limits to this.
Yes.
And listening to people talking about stuff, my mind was kind of going, what? Configuring all the time.
Yeah.
But then after, like, I've sat through 20 years of talks,
I know.
and I've helped organise 1,300 events over that time.
That is a huge amount of events and talks to sit through.
Yeah. So now
I just have to get that across, because if you think that one event or 2 events, 3 events can completely change people's lives. It can completely change the questions that you start to ask yourself with the right speaker, the right connection. They can evoke that inner spark to go, why, when, who am I, what am I doing? So to sit through so many talks, I'm sure a lot of them didn't do anything, and I'm sure a lot of them must have really just made you think, God, that's so true.
Yeah.
What am I doing?
It's always a mixture, of course.
Yeah.
So courses, of courses.
That must have been an amazing self-study is incredibly important.
Yes, and you know, the man know thyself and know the universe, the thing over Delphi.
Yes, it is.
But what most people do is their belief systems, their conditioning is reality.
Yeah.
You know, that's what creates reality.
Totally.
And there's no separation from it. Well, that's the way the world is. Life's unfair, people don't like me, you know, it never works out the way I blah, 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 blah.
Creating a reality.
And because they're so meshed, you know, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah.
But then when you can do things like this, where you start to go, when they start to be pulled apart, you go, well, is that true? And then there's evidence from the world saying, yes, it's true. But then you question it, and slowly that evidence shifts because you've shifted, so the world shifts.
Yeah.
And you know, I always believe in this magical principle of the outer world is a reflection of the inner world.
Oh yeah.
It's taken me many years to work, and as I've shifted something in the outer world goes, whoa, something different happens.
You know, that's one of my favourite saying. Nothing is going to go right on the outside if it's not going right on the inside.
Yeah.
It's such a big deal, and you know, I can't get that across to people enough. And the inner world is just first deal with yourself, and the rest will fall into place.
Yeah.
You know, it's such a.
And when I did this inquiry, I realised there's something beyond my ego self. Like, you know, we think, well, this is all we are, what we think and feel, but there's something more than that.
Yeah.
And in terms of transition, that's what's driving it. And then I've got to feel there's a driving force beyond me going, I want to change my job, that says now's the time to go. And it's like a river, you just kind of eventually got to jump in and go with it.
So would you just say you just listened, you became more trusting of the messages that you were feeling?
Yes and no, because you know, here I was at Alternatives. I was in an ideal relationship, ideal, like, you know, home, ideal job, and suddenly the forces within me, it was starting again, and I'm like, oh no, and I resisted it like crazy because I didn't want to let go of Alternatives, didn't want to let go of my relationship. And transition doesn't always mean you have to, but I felt everything was going to be shaken up, and it was in a dramatic way. I let go of everything.
Exactly. So, you know, I just want to go back one step. So we get to Lambeth, and when was the moment at Lambeth that you thought, just finished?
So that feeling again, it's like a feeling in the body. It's hard to describe, that you cannot be here anymore. And I remember I trained in tarot, for example. So one of the things I learned in tarot was if you ask specific questions, you get specific answers. If you ask vague questions, you get vague answers.
Yes.
So the universe is a tarot. You know, like you can read the universe.
Oh, I like that. The universe is a tarot.
Yeah, you can ask and then you get messages back.
Yeah.
But it's a skill, because you can, if your ego's too much there, you can misread. Oh, yeah, that means that. But you have to really be on it and really be clear, because you might not like the message.
Okay.
So I asked the universe, should I resign from my job in Lambeth? This was the question. And I knew within 48 hours I'd start getting the answer. Yeah. Because I was really on the kind of, in coaching, they say, the burning platform. Okay. So I really wanted to know. I really was ready to go. And then I was walking down Acre Lane in Brixton, and a guy was wearing this t-shirt, and on the back it had the old Nike branding, "Just Do It." Okay. And I saw it and I went, you must be kidding. You know, I knew it was really for me, because there's a kind of impact.
Yes,
do you know what I mean? There's like
I know what you mean.
Oh,
and you think this is it.
That's the answer. Yeah. But my mind went, you must be crazy. It's a good job, they pay you loads of money. It's not, it's stressful, but it's also easy. Yeah. And so I discounted it, and then I was walking along, and within about 2 minutes, I think, my eye just was pulled. My eyes pulled to this window, and in the window was "Just Do It." I don't know why I looked there, and I thought, well, I've asked the question, am I going to listen to it? Yeah. So I resigned. And it was just, then I had about 18 months of just doing all kinds of work, landscape gardening, selling blue-green algae, selling books, and working as an admin in Alternatives office. Yeah. I was just kind of like trying to make, from 20 years of in the matrix to suddenly out, and having no idea about what do I do in the world beyond banking and managing in a local government. And I had to find it. But the thing about the journey is you become more resourceful. If you're thrown into the sea, suddenly you might learn to swim, because you have to get out, you know.
Exactly. So. Do you think at this stage you were already, did you have any inklings that writing was something of a passion for you?
No, I started that in my mother died the week of 9/11. That very week, I remember calling the ambulance and the plane crashing on the TV and going, oh my God, what's that? And so that week was like, my mother went into a coma and there was like planes going, over and over again they replayed this thing.
Yes.
So that year she died, and that year I started writing, Freeing the Spirit. And it was really an intuition I got in the bath, write a book. It was really like that, time to write a book. I'm like, time to write a book. And I told one friend, who happened to have dinner with somebody in Random House who was headhunting for a particular book.
Yeah.
And she contacted me and I had a book deal. And I was like, but I can't write, I've never written before.
Yes.
So the universe is synchronicity, right?
I love that. Okay, I really want to speak about that in our next part, about time to write a book and you just write a book. Because, a lot of people must get that, but how did you do it? How did you just go, right, I'm a writer, I can write? It's not easy.
No, and a lot of people have a really tough time with it, but I just got the message, and and I was quite in tune with my inner self, so I went, time to write a book, and I, at the right moment, had the right conversation. So it's like trust, right? And I think a lot of people don't have that trust.
I think trust is a very big thing.
Yeah.
So before we end this part, I'm very interested to know.
So soon.
No. Part one. Part two is rich. If you want to know all the secrets of unleashing your creativity.
Yeah.
But part one, I'm interested, and I'm sure everybody else is. Who of all the speakers you booked would you say just really impacted you?
Oh gosh, that's a tough question. Let me see. They're not the most known ones. One is a poet called David Whyte.
David Whyte.
Spelled Whyte, and his poetry. He's got a way of weaving spiritual ideas in poetry in a way that is quite mind blowing. I've got all his stuff on my iPhone. I listen to it a lot. He talks a lot about coming to your edge and going beyond it, finding the real conversation of your life, not the kind of superficial ones. And so it's really like, and in poetry, I never liked poetry before, but when I heard this guy, and when I met him, I even quoted one of his poems to him back. It was kind of a bit, because I loved it so much, and he was kind of, nobody has done that to him before. I got one word wrong. Damn it. And there was another
English poet.
He's half Irish, half English, now living in America.
Wow.
And
Okay.
he hates the name, but some people call him the corporate poet because he goes in the corporate world and he changes corporate identities through poetry.
Yeah.
The other guy would be a guy called, what's his name? Gosh, it's gone out of my night. Okay, it'll come back to me in a minute. But he was a Jesuit priest who was excommunicated by the Pope, the last Pope, not the current Pope, for being too radical in free thinking. He wrote a book called Original Blessings, which said we're born in original blessing, not sin, and that was so radical for the church they threw him out.
I've heard this, yeah.
Matthew, oh gosh, what's his name? Terrible.
And what about his work really impacted you, do you think?
Well, the thing I noticed about when I met him, it was great to meet him and sit down and have tea with him, and I met him alongside another more traditional vicar of the church.
Yeah.
And just seeing these two conversations, one was about Jesus Christ as my saviour, and the other one was about embracive spirituality, including Native Americans, including kind of feminist spirituality. And he just had a broad vision and a way. He works with LA gangs, in America, to actually kind of get them back on track. And it's kind of gritty and real. He's not kind of somebody who just preaches. He's out there in the world. He's in his 70s now, Matthew Fox. Matthew Fox, very inspirational guy. He wrote a book, Spirituality for Men, which is kind of like most of the New Age is about for women.
Yeah, it's true,
actually. And he addressed something about men, and I just felt, for a lot of guys, they're having a hard time.
It's such a hard time,
Yeah.
and it's so true. A lot of this self-help or spirituality, I don't even like those terms, but I know I'm not alone in not liking the self-help terms. But it's very rare that you'll get a guy going to a bookshop and picking up Love Yourself. Guys don't do that, do they?
No, they don't do
that. So you do need, that's why I think Dan Millman did so well with We're the Peaceful Warrior, because men could relate to that. It's like, I want to be a warrior in life, but I want to fight my cause, my truth. So that's great, to really have something that connects to men. I think even your book, The Enlightenment of Work, it actually is great for women, but it's great for men because people are very, they feel very trapped. A lot of people feel trapped in worlds they don't belong, and they are aching to get out and sing another song.
Yeah.
Did that just rhyme?
That was good.
And I'm just thinking that your work does, the enlightenment of work does cover that.
Well, I did a talk 10 days ago on transitions at work.
Yeah.
And out of 100 people, I would say 80 were women. So it's still women driven.
It's still women.
It's still women driven. I think for a lot of guys...
Was it during the week and in the day?
No, it was,
Right.
It was an evening. I think for a lot of guys, it's easier to go through coaching, NLP, because for guys, we have to understand it intellectually.
Yeah.
Women, they want to feel it in their bodies. They want to feel something. But for a lot of guys, they want to go, I want to understand that before I can say yes to that.
Exactly.
So it's just a different way in for people.
Different way in.
Yeah.
So let's talk more about that way in, and more about, Steve, your work and how you actually are helping the world to find their writing voice.
Okay.
So just as you found yours.
Yes.
So everybody, we've come to the end of part 1, but join us for part 2, where we're going to speak about all the work that Steve does, international writing retreats, and as a life coach and as an author. So thank you very much. Namaste, everybody.